Stories are important in marketing. Bad stories may cost a brand a fortune. With good stories, it can win big time. For years, Georgia aspired to become a winning brand in the global tourism market. Today, we have two stories, and yes, they have already caught an international eye. First, BBC, Al Jazeera, IPI, and many more covered TV Pirveli's cameraman Alexander Lexo-Lashkarova, who was savagely assaulted during the anti-LGBTQ rally with his face bones broken to little pieces and an eye that had to be put under a surgeon's knife. Days after, Lexo's mother found him dead in his bed. The way the police treated his deceased body is another story that only his colleagues, other cameramen, could depict, since putting this picture into words is almost impossible. Second, Independent, VOA, Eurasianet, and many more covered how a Polish tourist was also stabbed by the same homophobic mob, with eyewitnesses reportedly saying his attackers believed he was gay. Fortunately, he is getting well, and unlike Lexo-Lashkarova, a cameraman working for the critical media in Georgia, at least the Minister of Economy visited him in the hospital, assuring this incident was an isolated case and did not reflect the country's attitude towards the tourists. Both these cases show how violence by hate groups has gripped Tbilisi these days, and how the state was not able to defend both its citizens and its guests. Still, there are very clear question marks about why there was not enough police presence. At the same time, this is not only a political issue, but economic as well. Immediately after the first news hit international media, most bookings at Georgia's hotels vanished. Posts after posts succeeded each other on Facebook, managers of hotels showing screenshots of cancelled bookings. And all this after the lockdown has finally been mostly lifted, and the interest of tourists to visit Georgia was slowly rebounding, adding to the economic recovery that has gradually started to pick up, tourism and service industry representing the biggest share in the GDP. But the negative impact of this violence goes further than just the tourism industry. Would you invest a penny in the country that shows instability beyond the COVID-19 pandemic, loading another layer of the heavy burden of uncertainty it has already brought to the world? Would you study in Georgia knowing that violent groups are after foreigners? Would you work from Georgia knowing that the streets are not safe? Would you support Georgia knowing it's sliding off the democratic path of respecting free speech and different points of view, neglecting human rights and calling minorities an impediment to the majority's rule? This is how we, the beaten journalists of Georgia, see the picture today. And this is what we do not want. We want stories that make this country win a ticket to the Euro-Atlantic integration. This is what we call winning a big time.
Yes, it's been a very tough week for us in many directions, and worrying. Not only for us, but for our strategic partners as well. Since day after day, government of Georgia gets a letter after letter with warnings that something is fundamentally not right and wrong, neither with the way the government is handling hate groups, nor with the way it handled the process of appointing judges, the process which should have been paused until the comprehensive and inclusive discussion of the court's system reform was laid out on the table. The wording from our strategic partners is quite strict and straightforward, I must say, which makes anyone familiar with the diplomatic language alert that something is not going the way it should. The only party that cannot or does not want to think about this option is the ruling party itself. And what we hear is stubborn explanations why the process must go on and why these appointments, yes, appointments, because it has nothing with elections process at all, and why this appointment should not be considered as breaching the agreement. Yes, today, even we and whole our team, the business media, are forced to speak more of politics rather than economics and business, since these are two sides of one big picture. And so we intertwined with each other that it is hard to unbundle them. This is a person the government of Georgia should be listening to right now. And I mean Ned Price, he's spokesperson of the US State Department. This is the second time already that Georgia is on the agenda. Not in the very decent light, I would say. This is wrong, and this is not the path to Euro-Atlantic integration, which is the call of the majority of Georgians and Georgia citizens.
A couple of questions about Georgia. I watched your briefing a week ago where you talked about organized violence on Tbilisi's streets when Georgian law enforcement, as many allege, intentionally did not stop the violent mobs attacks on journalists and members of the LGBTQI community. After your briefing, 2 days ago precisely, a cameraman of TV Pirveli, my colleague, Alexandre Lashkarova, this is actually him, he was beaten up by this mob and he died 2 days ago. And so my question would be, in light of these events and the recent past events in Georgia, there are serious concerns that Georgia is diverting towards illiberalism. So is the Secretary Blinken comfortable with that development? And also, what do you have to say to those people on the street right now who are demanding the resignation of the Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili? I might have a few follow-ups on that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, first, of course, we extend our deepest condolences to your former colleague, Lexo Lashkarova, to his family, loved ones, and of course, to his colleagues, yourself included. We're closely following the reports concerning his death. We do call for calm and an end to the violence that has already caused one tragic loss of life, in this case, the death of your colleague. The safety of every Georgian journalist and the credibility of democracy in Georgia, in fact, require that every individual who attacked peaceful protesters and journalists on July 5th and 6th, or those who incited violence.
And now I will call Elene to join me in our traditional praise in front of Forbes Georgia studio cameras, and we will start the checkpoints.
Antony Blinken, United States Secretary of State, has responded to the approval of Supreme Court nominees by the Georgian Parliament. The United States is deeply troubled by the Georgian Parliament's approval of Supreme Court nominees in contravention of the April 19 agreement. Ambitious judicial reform is critical to Georgia's success, Antony Blinken has tweeted.
The counter-demonstrators conducted organized violence targeting civic activists and journalists. Physical infringements of the safety of both groups were alarming. We recall in this context that journalists must be able to carry out their job safely and securely in any democracy. Violence is unacceptable and can never be excused. We mourn the tragic death of TV cameraman Lexo Lashkarova and await the results of the investigations into the case of his death. We regret that the authorities did not call publicly for the protection of those peacefully marking Pride events, take other necessary actions to prevent or deter hate-driven speech, or, in the end, provide sufficient protection as violent acts against activists and journalists were carried out. Reads the letter addressed to the government by EU heads of mission.
The appointments go against key provisions of the 19th April agreement to pause all ongoing appointments, comply fully with all recommendations made by the Venice Commission, and overall to increase the independence, accountability, and quality of the justice system in a broad, inclusive, and cross-party reform process, revising the selection process of Supreme Court judges in line with Venice Commission recommendations before proceeding with appointments is also a mutually agreed condition for the disbursement of the second tranche of EU macrofinancial assistance to Georgia under its current program, which could be negatively affected by this step, reads the official statement by the EU.
Unfortunately, this nomination and appointment process and the failure to undertake inclusive, comprehensive judicial reform fell short of the commitment Georgia's leaders, including the ruling party, made to implement the April 19 agreement in good faith, reads the statement of the US Embassy.
Meanwhile, we should not forget that COVID-19 new waves are still here with us, with 28,000 doses of Pfizer finally arriving in Georgia. The head of NCDC said there are all grounds to launch mass immunization in the country. According to Gamkrelidze, 8,000 vaccines will be administered daily, and this rate will further increase to 16 to 20,000 jabs per day, which is the ultimate target rate. We have shipped the first batch of Pfizer, which we receive under a bilateral agreement. Also, we are waiting for additional doses sent as a gift from the USA. Their arrival date and quantity will be known in the coming days. Vaccine stock is quite large in the country. In addition to Pfizer, we have Sinopharm, Sinovac and AstraZeneca. There are all grounds to intensify mass immunization in the country. This is what Amiran Gamkrelidze said and called on the citizens to take COVID jabs once again.
By the way, Elena, Amiran Gamkrelidze also mentioned this point, and the United States is already exercising diplomatic leadership to mobilize an international response to the COVID-19 pandemic by giving out vaccines for free. This week, the United States started to bring the same urgency to international vaccination efforts that it demonstrated at home. It started to send as many safe and effective vaccines to as many people around the world as fast as possible. This is the information that was released by US State Department, and you can now watch the video to see which countries have already received their gifts.
Yes, Georgi, I remember how the US President Joseph Biden said America would be the arsenal of vaccines in this global fight against COVID-19, just as America was the arsenal of democracy in World War II. These are his words, and these are the first actions that hopefully reach Georgia as well.
But US support to Georgia goes far beyond shipping vaccines.
This time we will focus on the support of the SME sector in Georgia from USA through different programs and different initiatives. We sat down with 3 representatives of different programs to tell the SME sector that they do have opportunities that they could use in these tough times and beyond. Sopikos Khirtladze, Marina Kutateladze and Beverly Hoover will be taking questions in the interview with the checkpoints. Welcome to the Forbes Georgia studio. Today with our guests, we will be speaking about SMEs and the support that USAID is providing to Georgian SMEs during pandemic and post-pandemic period. Thank you for watching us, and thank you for being with us and taking our questions. It turned out that SMEs is like the joint effort of all IFIs, of all development agencies. It's kind of like the main focus of the post-pandemic agenda. Why?
Small and medium-sized enterprises are really play major role in development of economies around the world, and Georgia is not an exception. They represent majority of Georgian private sector, and they account for 65% of total employment. So they are important. They are important for Georgia's inclusive and sustainable development, and that's why we, as an international donor agency, we are focusing our efforts on SME support.
And probably they are the hardest hit also during this pandemic, right?
Definitely, definitely.
Yes. So let's start with the specific projects that are targeting SMEs from different points of view, so to say, and answering like different needs and different tackling different challenges that this sector in Georgia says. For example, to take one program, 400 new full-time jobs and over 15 million USD leverage in private equity capital. Quite ambitious goals of the new 3-year program that also focuses mainly on SMEs. What are some of the tools and mechanisms through which you intend to reach these quite ambitious goals?
Our partner is Gazelle Finance, and you probably have heard of them. They are managing 31 million investment fund in Georgia, providing equity and debt financing for SMEs in various fields. With our support, our financial assistance to Gazelle Finance, they can really provide high quality technical assistance to their existing and potential portfolio companies, so that the companies can really improve their management systems, become more productive, and access new domestic and international markets.
If I'm not mistaken, this is missions like first time to work in such close cooperation with the fund.
Exactly. So while we have relatively well-developed banking sector, alternative forms of finance providers such as equity funds, venture capital industries that are typically a key source of finance for high risk, high growth enterprises in more advanced markets, they are still very underdeveloped in Georgia. And one key barrier there is that really the level of sophistication of SMEs is quite low still in Georgia, and that creates kind of a transaction cost between enterprises and private investors. So working with Gazelle Finance, we are able to really provide a blended instrument, which is a combination of technical assistance, know-how, and investment facility, investment capital that is provided by Gazelle Finance.
And then let me turn to Marina now, because that's where the skills part will be added, right? Your program, Marina, aims to train roughly 5,000 individuals, incentivize 30 businesses to develop long-term partnerships with training providers, and mobilize 7 million USD in cost share from the private sector.
Every survey that was conducted in Georgia shows that there is the mismatch in the skills that the skills providers and graduates have, and the needs that the private sector have for expansion. So this program is specifically aimed to resolve this problem. But this problem can only be resolved if the lasting and sustainable relationships is established between the employers and the skill providers. Right now, the problem that we have that these two entities practically do not speak with each other. The surveys also tell us that only 1 or 2% of the employers have any relationships with the skill providers. So obviously skill providers cannot provide the skills that they need if there is no communication. And the biggest ambition of this program is to change this relationship and to change it sustainably. We have the implementing entity, American organization that will be implementing this program. And this organization will help private sector and skill providers to develop the models of this engagement. This already exists outside, and we will try to bring those best practices and to adjust them to the Georgian reality. Probably this is biggest grant investment in skills in Georgia that is made by one program.
This to me seems like a very good and sustainable step towards inclusive growth that we are speaking. Absolutely. I have some other numbers as well, because this program should ensure that at least 35% of trainees come from rural areas and or ethnic minority communities, and at least 45% are women. Does pandemic also play a role here? Because we see that especially these groups that are identified are also hardest hit.
Absolutely, I agree. And those numbers, I think, even are more ambitious than the total number, because what is happening in Georgia is that access to the skills in general is, to the skills training programs in general is scarce, but in the rural areas it practically does not exist. Most of our skill providers are concentrated either in Tbilisi, Batumi, or maybe in Kutaisi. And the rest of Georgia, there is nothing, which creates another constraint to the rural economic development and inclusive growth, which is a priority for USAID and also for the government. So we will specifically focus on developing the high quality skills programs in the rural areas that responds to the economic requirements of those regions. And especially focus will be on the ethnic minorities and the people with the special needs. And you mentioned the women participation. You know that in Georgia we have pretty good numbers in women participation in education. Actually, in tertiary education, I think women participation is even higher than the men. But what we see,
the journalism is also that sphere.
Yes, but what we see afterwards is that the salaries that women receive, first of all, women participation in the workforce is lower than the men, and the salary of women, average salary, is much lower than the men. The reason is that for social norms or the cultural norms or for different reasons, women are mostly choosing the professions that are less paid than the men's. This is one reason, and another reason are that the men are more on the managerial positions. The share of the men on the managerial positions are higher than the women. So we want to increase specifically women's participation on the programs where we have the highly paid jobs.
Let me now turn to the private sector engagement, and emphasis on rural Georgia is in this program as well.
Thank you, Elena, for this opportunity to speak to USAID's new priorities for private sector engagement. It's something that we are taking very seriously and ambitiously in the rollout and the implementation of our country strategy. As Sofiko and Marina both spoke to, we have two new programs that are supporting SMEs and upgrading skills, and they'll both benefit the rural areas and SMEs in different ways. But this is part of a larger strategy we have for working hand in hand with the private sector to co-create solutions that really will yield results long after USAID's assistance has ended. For example, we have already worked with the Georgian Farmers Association to address constraints that the Ajar Group was having to source their produce locally. And we worked with them in a way in which they developed a mobile matchmaking solution in which farmers were linked with buyers. Mm-hmm. That platform went on to increase sales by 4 million for farmers and has been taken up by other buyers in the industry, including hotels and restaurants.
And your focus in rural Georgia is on startups and innovative solutions, innovations.
Exactly.
Why?
Exactly, because in those areas, that's what's needed. And the private sector is the best investor in terms of bringing about those innovations. We are placing this emphasis on the private sector as they are the engines of growth. And in the rural areas, that's really needed right now. And post-pandemic, that's critical. The lack of tourism, the lack of access to e-commerce platforms, the low business activity that's been impacting rural areas over the past year has really created a very difficult challenge for rural areas and rural businesses. So through all these programs and this special emphasis on working with the private sector to stimulate activity, we're hoping to sort of shore up and bridge that gap. Another example we have of this approach is we've worked with McDonald's in the past year where we're certifying suppliers so that they can source locally their lettuce, for example, for their restaurants. which they're importing right now, but that can be a valuable income stream to farmers and local suppliers. So in this way, we're trying to bring about the market actors to support investment and really generate business activity in the regions and create jobs.
Yes, this focus on co-creating win-win supply chain solutions, this seems to be a very important skill, so to say, that SME sector could have, because we hear that a lot might change on the supply chains after the pandemic. European Union, for example, also thinking of bringing closer the supply chains, and because of the CFTA, Georgia might be well positioned to use that. So what is exactly this win-win supply chain solutions, and how USAID is helping SMEs and broadly business in Georgia in that direction?
Thank you for that question. The win-win solution is really about working with the private sector as a source of ideas, innovation, investment, shared advocacy, and resources, not just resources alone. It's working with them across the board for solutions that advance their core business interests, but also deliver on addressing the development challenges. And we find that by working in this way, we can support the larger business actors in meeting their needs, come up with a very strong, sustainable impact that addresses the development issues at hand. The AgroNofty mobile matchmaking platform is a perfect example, because that's a win-win for those buyers in the hotel and restaurants that are trying to source locally, but at the same time allowing farmers to connect to a platform in which they meet that demand, and we support them to meet that standard in quality and quantity. So this is the type of solutions that we're looking for, and where Georgia's at right now, this is in an area where we have an emerging network of private sector partners to work with in this way. For example, what Sofika was mentioning about the Gazelle finance program, this is an excellent way of supporting those emerging actors in the economy and businesses that can then become that partner to co-invest in smaller SMEs. And this will pay dividends across the board for Georgia, and especially in rural areas.
Yes, Sofika mentioned that the number of SMEs is really big, and they are the main employer in the country. But also, so if we look what share they have in overall GDP, we will see that this is quite low. What are some challenges there, and how do these programs that we have talked about, how they are addressing this challenge? And this question goes to all three of you from your perspective, of course, but Sofa, let's start.
So I actually already alluded to this challenge that we identify, which is access to diversified sources of investment funds and the technical assistance. Structural reforms that actually help to upgrade the sophistication level of SMEs and deepen financial markets beyond the traditional banking products is necessary to tackle that problem.
For the skills program, it is very rare that the donor has a program where the sectors are not identified, the approaches are not already identified in the design. This is not the case for our program. We are open, we are ready to listen to the private sector, to understand their needs and co-create those grants and the grant facility to respond to their needs. We have not selected. We could have done the analysis
the framework and then
yeah.
choose from there.
Yes. But no, we are ready. We will just have the criteria to assess what will be the best value for our investments, and the best value, it will be the guarantee of employment and the need of those skills that and the programs that we will create in the labor market, the value that the graduates will create for their employers, and the possibility and the salaries that they will get in future.
That's where we already see the share in GDP rising. Thank you.
I'd like to sort of highlight that the race to find a vaccine and roll it out worldwide underscores the critical need for private-public cooperation, and in particular the private sector's role to innovate and to bring those things to market. And I think that when you're speaking to the resiliency needed at this moment to recover from the pandemic, to get the economy going again, we need this cooperation more than ever. And so USAID is taking a concerted effort to build it into each one of our programs. And I love the industry-led skills development program because it is about being a partner to the major employers, to the major industries in meeting the needs that they have for skilled labor, and working with them to develop programs that answer to those needs. So it's market driven, but it will also deliver huge benefits for Georgians across the country who are going to have those skills and have that close ability to work in those industries and in those companies.
Yes, thank you so much for giving us very important insights into these programs. And just to sum up our conversation, what is your main message to SMEs today, to our viewers and followers of the Checkpoint?
We invite cooperation with SMEs, with the private sector, as a source of ideas, innovation, investment, shared advocacy, and we're ready to work with private sector partners in ways that we haven't in the past, not just in our programming, but actually in the design and co-creating these solutions to development challenges.
We are ready to help them to make really lasting changes, but we want the full participation from these stakeholders. We are ready to work with each of them separately and all of them together to reach those objectives that we have for this program. And I want to add one more thing about, we spoke about the international certification, and this is very important for the quality of the programs that we will create. But even more important, it is for the sustainability of those programs, because in this era of innovation and the change, our programs will also become obsolete very soon. But that's why it's important that they build those international partnerships so that they will change also as soon as the world and the West
they will
is
have
changing.
the skill to adapt as well.
And
yes,
and they
like
will have
main
the partner that will stay
century.
with them after we are gone.
We see small and medium enterprises as a critical to Georgia's economic development. This is again a good invitation for private sector finance providers, private sector actors to co-create so we can come up with these development solutions.
Thank you so much, and I hope SME sector and all the stakeholders that you have mentioned will use this opportunity and this invitation. Thank you for being with us again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And let me just add here, Georgi, real quick, that we continue to gather these initiatives from different donor organizations and IFIs to further highlight what are some opportunities that the SME sector in Georgia could use to alleviate the impact of pandemic, since this is the hardest hit sector and the main focus in heart of post-pandemic international support agenda.
Wonderful. Meanwhile, USAID is in our focus today, and let me tell our viewers and followers that just a few days ago, the presentation of the USAID project ZRDA was held at the Expo Georgia Exhibition Center, Development of Sustainable Tourism in Tusheti.
Yes, Georgi, USAID Georgia Mission Director Peter Wiebler also joined the discussion about how USAID is working with a broad range of partners to support the development of regions like Tusheti.
Yeah, and our eyes and ears and our souls as well are on that event with Tatia Kakiashvili, who will now tell us more about the results of the USAID's support to the region and specifically to Tusheti. The results were summarized in details at the event that came into the Checkpoint's focus.
Abanu Pass. A flock of sheep spread out in the field. Upper Omalo, Keselu Castle, Chagma Valley, Doju, Gometsari Valley. This is an incomplete list of the main sightseeings in Tusheti. In the open spaces here and there are houses hidden in nature, with which they have centuries-old stories and sites that make a special impression on tourists. Clearly, the infrastructural development of such a tourist location is crucial. USAID actively assists our country in the development of the region. A few days ago, the presentation of the USAID project Zrda was held at the Expo Georgia Exhibition Center, Development of Sustainable Tourism in Tusheti. The results of the support carried out so far were summarized at the event, which includes strengthening community governance, protecting the environment and natural resources, and working for sustainable economic development in the region.
The economic potential of tourism in Tusheti is not as great as it is in other parts of the country. So what we've been doing at USAID through our Zrda project has been trying to work with the local community, the private sector, local government, the national government, to try to create new sustainable models for tourism, to promote tourism in the country. It's very exciting because, you know, Georgia has so many natural treasures. Those natural treasures are key to tourism here and to the economic potential that tourism can unlock. But to be sustainable, those resources like national parks, like protected areas like Tusheti, have to be maintained. The local traditions need to be maintained, the nature must be preserved, and we have to do everything in as sustainable a manner as possible.
In fact, we have the result when the projects implemented by USAID in Tusheti yielded very good results. Tusheti is developing as an agro-tourism sector, which means not only that the people who come enjoy nature, but also that the development in the field of agriculture is visible. We have the opportunity to produce and sell products typical for Tusheti in the form of both food and handicrafts. We also have the opportunity to create more tourist facilities to employ people in Tusheti. All this is the merit of such good projects.
The USAID project was launched in 2018 with Zrda supporting the agrarian, tourism and service sectors through grants, professional development, training and technical support for private and public sector representatives. In total, in 2018-2021, the investment in Tusheti is about 600,000 Georgian lari. As a result, local income generation in the whole of Akhmeta municipality reached 4.1 million Georgian lari, half of which comes to Tusheti. Also, 45 new jobs were created as a result of these investments.
Creating jobs is proportionally connected to all the economic development activities that we've been implementing during last 3 years in Tusheti and generally in Akhmeta municipality, supporting businesses, creating new businesses, and plus building the capacity of business representatives in terms of food safety, service standards. This has been the main focus for us. Also, we've created a lot of activities to complement the capacity building and promotion of adventure tourism, such as equestrian tourism development. All these interventions that we've been conducting in Tusheti have been complementing definitely the job creation and increasing the generation of the income.
During these years, the following works facilitated the correct positioning of Tusheti as a remarkable location. Establishment of Baba Neoli Working Group to advocate for the needs and interests of the people of Tusheti, infrastructure arrangements and technical support, organizing trainings for tourism and agricultural sectors, development of equestrian tourism, increasingly popularizing cultural heritage and more. So, as the visitors call, this unexplored Tusheti has even greater potential to attract tourists in the future.
I never knew, but Tusheti is home to wild tea, Georgi. Did you know?
No, I didn't.
If you Google, every traveler has one story in their arsenal about the tradition of drinking tea in Tusheti. Wild thyme tea from Tusheti. You can find it on TripAdvisor even, and other sites that are for tourists and travelers.
Not bad, Elena. More so that with this bridge we have the green light to proceed with our industrial review outlook, let me say so, and that's tea production in Georgia. Everything about the tea sector in Georgia you can find in this just one piece that our senior reporter Ani Tavadze has worked on.
The estimated date of introduction of the tea plant in Georgia is considered to be 1847-1849, when Georgian tea was first cultivated in the new established botanical garden in Sukhumi. During the same period, tea culture spread in Zugdidi and Ozurgeti. Georgian tea was presented at the Russian Agricultural Exhibition in St. Petersburg in 1864 and got its first positive evaluation. During the Soviet era, tea plantations were cultivated on about 65,000 hectares. During this period, Georgia produced, cultivated, and delivered more than 500,000 tons of green leaves. Today, there are up to 1,800 hectares of tea plantations in Georgia. In January-April of this year, $1,473,330 worth of flavored as well as non-flavored tea was exported from the country. It should be noted that annual exports have decreased. According to Geostat, tea exports in the same period in 2020 amounted to $1,999,720. As for the countries where tea is exported, Azerbaijan tops the list, where in January-April 2021, $759,620 worth of tea was exported. Then comes Turkey with $276,820. In third place comes Turkmenistan, where $91,160 worth of tea was exported. The fourth and fifth positions are occupied by Mongolia and Kazakhstan, where tea exports during the reporting period amounted to $85,570 and $80,050 respectively. The company Gurieli was founded in 1996. The company has two production lines, one in Guria and the other one in Samegrelo. Gurieli owns a 100-hectare tea plantation that employs a total of 100 local tea growers. Sales fell by 15% in 2020, and the primary reason for this is the pandemic as well as the difficulties caused by it, including the halt of the HoReCa sector and tourism. A complication of the logistics chain on the packaging materials was also one of the reasons. Due to the listed reasons, Gurieli had to increase prices.
The year started quite hard. These negative emotions and expectations affected the business. I cannot say that this situation led to an even more pessimistic revision. Also, we remained at the same level as we were in terms of evaluation.
Mana Tea Company, which has established itself in the market in the recent years, is now a very successful brand. 2020 was worse than 2019. This is how the company's co-founder assesses the previous year. There was a 30% decline in export markets. They were able to maintain the price of the tea. Despite the difficulties, the company depicts the positive dynamics of 2021.
Before March 2020, we were exporting in large quantities. However, due to the pandemic, due to distribution, exports stopped. Our partners are mostly in the Europe. The suspension and the closure of the countries caused the export situation to deteriorate. However, since March this year, we have started to work on the export potential again.
The founder of the tea company Georgian Flavor, located in Guria, believes that the state should pay attention to other businesses besides the wine sector. There is a demand for tea export, but it is difficult to complete so. The founder stresses the importance of state aid in this area.
Tea is such a thing, it needs to be raw in itself. This raw material market needs time and finances. That is why we need state support to be prepared.
David Teniashvili, who created the cooperative and started its development, says that the project didn't work because the members of the cooperative couldn't fulfill their obligations. Today, he's an individual entrepreneur and produces 3 to 4 tons of tea. He also depicts that the pandemic hit the business and reduced sales. According to him, the lack of standards and unfair internal competition of enterprises remain a problem in the market, which hinders sales.
We can't sell almost 60% of tea. The biggest problem with this, however, is that several entrepreneurs cannot agree to produce tea of the same quality and type, which actually affects sales negatively. To some extent, there is a demand for quantities from abroad.
Tea growers have begun to address the problems of the past year. With the opening up of country's economy and the relaunch of the HoReCa sector, some of them set positive expectations and have even come up with plans for achieving specific positive results.
Well, I guess this is all for today. Very hard week for Georgia, but we tried our best to make it bearable for you, our viewers and followers on our main platforms, bm.g and forbes.g.
Yeah, as Elena mentioned, this is all for today, but we will meet definitely next Sunday, and before that you can watch what Forbes offers you in its new edition. Well, a short teaser from us for you to always have the ambition to pursue success. Till Sunday, and don't forget to follow us on Forbes and bm.g.
There is no unattainable goal. The work that you put your soul into becomes your victory, the victory over yourself. And if you convert this into your personal success and victory, you will see people you have really helped. This is the way to new goal. This quote belongs to Tamar Tsirekidze, a person who practiced the art of returning light and giving patients the joy of life with sight. What the ophthalmologist went through before she performed the miracles, Tamar Tsirekidze is the main story of the June-July issue of Forbes Women.
Introducing Forbes 50 over 50 inaugural list, which brings together entrepreneurs, leaders, scientists, and creative women who have reached the pinnacle of success after the age of 50. Kaya Samsonadze and Hotels for Everyone. This is another businesswoman success story with the main goal of giving the country high-quality boutique hotels, restaurants, bars, as well as other coexisting concepts in the field of hospitality. Changed life during the pandemic, the journey from Tbilisi to Kakheti, and the case that set a completely new pace, Forbes Woman reveals the still unknown details of Marina Chonia's story. More women in technology and Pulsar AI at the forefront of Georgian technologies. Sopoch Oidze talks about success, several years of experience, and future plans. You will also read an interview with a human rights defender. Is Georgia lagging behind in progress? Renate Winter answers tough questions. If you're wondering how consumers and businesses can be on the same wavelength and or what the Insurance in Simple Language campaign means, then you should read the interview of Tatia Ariauli, TBC Insurance, Marketing and Public Relations Manager. In the same issue, you will travel to Marjanishvili 7, the renewed multifunctional space of the TBC concept, which combines exhibition subspaces of 3 different formats and creates even wider opportunities to support art and culture projects. In this new edition, you will also read Interview with Tinatin Getiashvili, When Medical Education is Necessary for Effective Business Management. Sopho Sorolashvili tells us the story of how work can be a place of pleasure instead of obligation. A story revived in detail, this is the story of Ninoch Khatarashvili. Social projects have occupied an important place in the corporate life of Pharmadepot for a long time now. Due to recent developments in the world, the company decided to contribute to the support of small businesses by trying to involve more companies and people in environmental or other social projects that are ultimately directly proportional to human health. Niki Gobejishvili, head of marketing and communications of the company, talks more in detail about the activities of socially responsible business. How to prepare the skin for spring. Beauty Lab and Keta Barashvili share the most necessary and interesting tips of the season. Forbes Woman will also introduce you to a successful woman from Gori, Teonat Siramwa. Read about her difficulties, main goals, and prospects in the June-July issue of Forbes Woman.